Welcome, everyone. Thank you for allowing us to speak at your conference. The name of our lecture is Design, Iteration, Curation, Reimagining City Spaces. My name is Gerdo Aquino, and I'll be joined by my partner, Thomas Balsley. We'll introduce ourselves in a little bit. But we are partners at a firm called SWA. And we are a firm that believes public space, public realm means everything to everyone. It's a completely inclusive idea that we believe in as part of how we shape spaces and how we work together as planners and designers. We are a 100% employee-owned firm and have been for over 60 years. We work globally around the world. We're almost 300 people, and we believe that collaboration creates the most amazing ideas and concepts to improve quality of life for the work that we do in every community. Nelson Mandela Park is geographically in a very important area in the world. We have had the opportunity to work globally in different countries to really offer our assistance and input and big ideas to solve very important issues facing our cities. You can see in this map the office locations. I am in Los Angeles, and Tom is in New York. Two very interesting cities. We argue all the time, but we agree on one thing, and that is we believe cities energize us very much in the same way that Rotterdam energizes you to think big. Our core values, number one, we believe in mobility and access. We think if a city is going to function properly, people need to be able to move. We also believe that communities need to be healthy. They need to be outside doing things, whether they're exercising or recreation. We believe infrastructure needs to be multi-benefit. It's not only to solve ecological issues, but also create bicycle lanes and allow people to get access to open space. It's for nature, it's for economy. And then our final core value is comprehensive resiliency, meaning that these landscapes are resilient in the face of incredible storm events or heat island or other kind of climate-related issues. The areas of expertise for us is very broad. These keywords on the screen speak to our desire to be a part of different types of work at different scales. And then, of course, as I mentioned earlier, we're highly collaborative. Our offices also work with other offices within SWA. Tom and I, even though we're in different geographic locations, we actually work together as we are in the project that we're going to share with you today with Nelson Mandela Park. We also believe that our work needs to be based on good research. Fundamental research allows us to be innovative and unique in every situation. So we utilize state-of-the-art technologies, whether it's for mapping or for metrics, or to develop spreadsheets for a particular client that is interested in economics. We also make sure that we stay relevant in terms of our publications. We continually put out white papers, books, publications that speak to the relevant issues that are going on in our communities. By the numbers, I talked a little bit about this, but we're a large firm. We're the largest landscape architecture practice in the United States. We have an incredible amount of built work, and we're very proud of, again, the collaboration that we've had with consultants and clients around the world. So who are we? Again, my name is Gerdo Aquino, and Tom's going to introduce himself. I am the CEO of SWA. I oversee all the offices and kind of our strategic planning as we move forward. I'm also a design principal here in the Los Angeles office. And a lot of what I do revolves around urban design, landscape architecture, and public realm. Tom?
Yes, thanks, Gerdo. And I'm Tom Balsley. I'm also a design principal with SWA Balsley in the New York studio. And I'm the proud recipient of the ASLA's prestigious design medal. I should be hanging it on my neck, but I don't do that. But I want to thank you for the opportunity that you've given us to join your City Makers Conference and to share our design approach to urban spaces of all scales. You will see some projects of ours that do touch upon all scales and all typologies. We hope to give you a kind of a broad sense of who we are and what we do. And hopefully you'll find that some of these have resonance with your great city and its public realm. And they certainly have had resonance with our work in Nelson Mandela Park. So let's begin and start in with some projects at a very, very small scale. Of course, working in New York, we have lots of small spaces. And for the last 40 years, I've been doing small little, what we call POPs, privately owned public open spaces all throughout Manhattan. And they are a very important element in terms of bringing, improving and elevating the livability of the city, because they in fact end up to be those wonderful spaces that are within a block or two of where people work or live, that can really touch their daily lives in a different way, not necessarily better, but certainly in a different way than those high profile central parks or waterfront parks that are more destination spaces. So these spaces are very important, and I've played a very major role in getting them spread throughout Manhattan to make them let them become part of New Yorkers' lives. As part of the work that I do and that we've done, it's been very much informed by the writings and the philosophies of William White and his specifically in his publication, The Social Life of Small Urban Spaces. I think most architects and urban designers and landscape architects have read his book, but it was written 40 years ago. And 40 years ago, and of course, it was all about New York and its spaces. But 40 years ago, New York was a different city. Public space was a different kind of a thing on people's minds. It wasn't that wonderful space we think of now. It was really almost a stigmatized idea of public space, where usually bad things happen, not a lot of good things happen. And so William White observed these spaces and really took a great deal of trouble to understand why some of them failed and why some of them succeeded. But that was 40 years ago. So we thought, SWA thought, that we'd put a team together and create a kind of a follow-up to that book called Plaza Life Revisited. And it sort of goes through the exercises of research and observation that William White went through, but it's also employing some modern day technology to help give us a better understanding of how people are using the spaces. It's been a very, very helpful guide for us as we've continued to design these spaces. And just to give you an idea of what that really means, a lot of our work, actually, we're sort of called the Plaza Doctors, because a lot of our work is to come in and sort of clean up behind the messes that our predecessor designers have left in their various cities throughout the world and throughout the US. And these are just a few examples of the before and after, the turnaround, by using those principles that Holly White has laid out. These spaces have really become alive and become the centerpieces of their neighborhoods, wherever they may be. So we're very proud of the spaces, and in particular, how we've managed to transform the public's perception and its sort of its sense of pride that it has in its neighborhood by these small little interventions. Next. These are just some other examples on other scales. In downtown Cleveland, what was just an empty plaza is now this wonderful space for events, social events, etc. And likewise in Tampa, Florida, what was an art piece of pathways and lawns for the city for 30 years, but there was no one actually came to the space right on their river. We completely have transformed it with museums and spaces of all scales. So it's that work in these small spaces and in some cases medium-sized spaces that's very people-centric and very informed by the social, economic, and cultural forces that should be at play for all of these spaces to succeed. And one last part of it, and it's important, I think it's relevant to almost any city and any public space. We have taken an awful lot of attention, brought an awful lot of attention to public seating and public strategies. So we sort of call it the beyond the bench approach. There's got to be something more than just a bench to tell us where to sit and which direction to look in. And this is just a simple example of our kind of strategies that we bring to all of our projects. So the simple introduction of what we would consider maybe that one object in our house that makes us feel most comfortable is maybe that coffee table in your family room. And so we've introduced the coffee table, if you will, to the bench, and it completely transforms what that bench can do and how it can be used for so many purposes other than just sitting and looking straight ahead. So it's just a taste of our approach to public spaces and the way people can enjoy them more.
Transitioning to a somewhat larger scale, this is in Santa Monica, California, next to Los Angeles. And it's what we call the beach trail. So throughout all of California, there is access on the beach. And this was a project where it was such a important and highly used trail that there were a lot of conflicts. There were a lot of accidents between pedestrians and bicyclists. So we were hired to reimagine this trail as something that's safe and accessible, but also fun and creative and unique and artistic. And you can see what you're seeing here is that's the natural bluff that currently exists. And then of course, the beach trail down below. Those dividers you see there are kind of these sculptural concrete pieces that we designed to separate pedestrians from bicyclists. We also developed a series of these plazas where you have the high impact areas between bicyclists and pedestrians and created these moments where nature could be interpreted via these kind of concrete impressionistic patterns that are on the ground. So as to alert people that, hey, here's a potential conflict area, maybe you should slow down. Does it work? We think it does. So far, it's been pretty good, pretty safe, no incidents so far. And of course, this is a few kilometers long. So the idea extends across the entire coastline that's in Santa Monica. It also creates a kind of an interesting vibe in the evening. Again, it kind of blends in with the character and the language of this part of the Santa Monica Beach Trail. And then even larger, this is in Belgrade, Serbia. So this was an attempt to reconnect the old town with its waterfront. Previous to what you see on the screen, it was a typical post-industrial waterfront with really no public realm until we were able to come in and work with the city directly to integrate a regional bike trail, promenade, and areas for informal food trucks. So all of this is happening within a very narrow section. We worked with many artists in Belgrade. We also took a lot of those existing rail lines that were on the site and repurposed them into these bike racks, as you can see here in the foreground of the image. So we tried to be creative with utilizing existing materials. Here you can kind of see the first phase of the project with areas for connecting to the water via these kind of outdoor amphitheaters, restaurants, places to sit, gathering areas. And of course, kind of the evening respite of just really enjoying life in the city.
Curtis Hickson Park in Tampa, Florida is a perfect example of sort of the expression we use for breathing life into failed spaces. It was a terrible waterfront front door for the city to the river that it was founded on. To have parking garages underground and parking garages above ground and virtually no public access to the water at all. We actually managed to convince the city to take its underground parking garages out of there and put new museums against the existing parking garage to create a new urban wall for what would become their new, as they call it, their new crown jewel park in the city of Tampa, Florida. Well, what's important as you look at this image is, oh yes, well, it's a very interesting green space, but it's been very carefully planned and programmed so that it can host any number of events and activities and uses, whether they're small little get-togethers or they're huge events for celebrating Super Bowl football like they did a couple of years ago here. So let's take a look at some of those images just to give you a peek of all that can happen on that green stage. And it's really this city's opportunity to really celebrate itself and announce itself to the world, but also to be there for citizens to come, whether it's for a dog run or whether it's for to splash in the fountain or play area or kicking a soccer ball out on the lawn. It's these spaces that really have to provide that multitude of opportunities that can touch all people, be totally inclusive, and really make the entire city give it its warm embrace. And Curtis Hickson Park is certainly one of those spaces. And likewise, on a similar scale, but far away, this is Moscow's Pavloskaya station. It's right on the outer loop of the city. It's a historic train station. You'll see it in the upper left. And this site just sat there abandoned in front of the train station between the loop road itself and the station. And we were asked to conduct an actual design competition, which we won together with an architecture firm, A+. And it was conducted in a way that started with the notion, we need to bring retail below ground. How can we do this cat park and have retail below and at the same time have this space really serve the park-starved community that surrounded it? The result is an unbelievable park called Pavloskaya Park, and it has these large structures that are just peeking out of the surface and providing exits and entrances to the retail below, but it's also a way of bringing the synergy between people who come to a park for a lot of active use and who might want to slide down in shop and eat below and then come back up. Maybe the shoppers want to get a little outdoor space, a little urban space. All of that takes place here, but it's also this wonderful setting for, as I mentioned, the community that surrounds it. There's something in the park for everyone, and that's the key to our design for these spaces. Can they be a civic space that can really host events at that scale and at the same time have that kind of intimacy and quality to it that it really resonates with neighbors and residents that want to wander in and out during the daytime? This is a peek of how this is going to completely rebrand and reimagine the entire neighborhood out here on the edge of the Loop Road. It's not finished yet. We're expecting for a big opening in the spring, but we did get a winter photograph of some enjoyment on some of the beyond the bench seating opportunities that we've introduced to the park.
And then kind of aligned with the theme of your conference, the notion of kind of moving fast and moving slow. This is Buffalo Bayou, a waterway, an urban waterway in downtown Houston. And the moving fast part is when those big storms come through, there's major flooding. The slow part of it is the idea that landscape can actually slow down that water, filter that water, and keep people safe. Here are some images of kind of before on the left, kind of a natural low water day every day. And then on the right, kind of the surge of floodwaters that come through when those big storms happen. How do we address that to keep people safe? And the flooding relates to the big hurricanes that pass through Houston, but also the seasonal rainstorms. And it's a very important issue that many cities around the world are trying to address in terms of resiliency. And we were able to address that with this project. The approach was really looking at ecology and trying to understand how water moves or wants to move naturally, and then creating landscape architectural devices to slow that water down, while also allowing kind of what we talked about earlier, the idea that it's also multi-benefit. So on the everyday kind of open space park, there are bicyclists and pedestrians and bird watchers. There are connections from an art district to a commercial district via these sculptural artistic bridges. And also, the idea that as the bayou improves, so do the edges. And the edges have been taken on by commercial development, housing, all kinds of new economic development has happened along the edges of the bayou simply because we were able to solve some of those large flooding issues and make it safe for everyone.
Well, this is a project, or actually it's two projects, but it's really what we're considering sort of a case study for Nelson Mandela. It started as the Queens West Parks. You see this whole green swath that we started on in 1993. It's directly across the river, the East River, from the United Nations, to give you a sense of where you are here. And this is the shoreline of what's called Long Island City, which is part of Queens, New York. This green swath was really imagined as a whole new development community that would be mixed, market and affordable. And of course, the centerpiece of it all was its waterfront parks. And it was really a question of, what will these parks do? How will they perform? And in a big question with waterfront parks, and many parks, but in particular waterfront parks, is will they be a community park that really resonates with the neighbors in the community? But can they also be that great civic space that attracts people from all over the city, a place where they can celebrate and there can be events and festivals? Can both of those ideas happen in one space? And that's the challenge when we're designing these kinds of spaces that are on sort of, if you will, the flyway of a park system, if we're lucky, that has connective greenways and people are biking and walking along the length. And okay, here they are in this park, but they don't live in this neighborhood, but they certainly want to enjoy this park. So it's a real challenge. And I think that we've really met the challenge, because this park has really been so tightly embraced by the community. They actually created a friends organization that cares for this park in ways that above and beyond how the city is able to care for it. And by the way, this is a city cared for space. It's not a conservancy with lots of $1 million to take care of it. It's really important that as you're seeing these images, that you keep in mind that this is what we call a blue collar park. Okay. And this is what the site looks like. As you're looking from the site, the views are extraordinary. They're world-class views. But what happened here was it was all about railroads. Rails would come down from Long Island down to the shore and have to be pushed out onto barges and go over to New Jersey to be able to get to the rest of the United States. So it was a very important rail transfer point. And then we thought it was very important that celebrating the heritage, uncovering and celebrating the heritage and letting it be part of the 21st century narrative of this park and this place was very, very important. And this is sort of a view up in the upper left is the site that we encountered. And this is the site that now exists here at what is now called Gantry Plaza State Park. It's a middle section of that total park, but it's sort of an introduction to Hunters Point South Park that you're going to see in a second. And this is the aerial view looking out over what was just a rail yard, and it's been converted over into these extraordinary, what we call marine follies, each one of them providing a special place for the neighbors and a new way to tour the waterfront from pier to pier and not just up and down the river. Give you a sense of how we're able to fold the kind of the 21st century contemporary design and uses and still respect the history of the place. And this is the community's favorite destination. It's the four either sunbathing chaise lounges or stargazing chaise lounges, depending on which time of the day you're going out there. So this is the Hunters Point South site, and it's a continuation of the Gantry Plaza Park that I just showed you that's up in the upper left-hand corner of the slide. And this is Hunters Point South, which is now held up as a global model for urban waterfront resiliency and urban resilient communities. Those two ideas have come together into this one space, and that's why it's garnered an awful lot of attention because it's really a demonstration of how, as Gerdo was saying earlier, these spaces have to perform, of course, as resilient spaces, but part of their performance should be beyond just keeping people dry. Their performance should be beyond, entail social, cultural, and even economic benefits that come out of these spaces as well. And hopefully you'll see that as we move through the project. So we encountered a site that was blessed, if you will, with these massive landfills that came out of the excavation of the Midtown Tunnel and were just dropped over there on that other shoreline of Queens that way back then didn't matter that much. Now, of course, Queens is the fastest growing borough in all of New York City. But at the time, it was a dump ground. And so we encountered those large landforms, but began to imagine them immediately as a wonderful additive element to an otherwise very flat and level landscape of Long Island City. And you'll see how we did that. But the site is also one, and the image that you see there is our famous Hurricane Sandy that came into New York and flooded the whole downtown of New York. It also flooded this site, and this gives you an idea of how much water was coming into this site. And we began to develop some very strong and strategic resiliency strategies for the landscape and the engineering and the infrastructure all coming together as a very holistic exercise. Okay. This is the plan for Hunters Point South, and it really consists of the active area to the left of the plan, and then a new island that we created in the center, that small little island you see in the bottom in the center. That was a landfill, and we actually created an island. And then what we call the promontory, which was a huge landfill, and we kept that elevationally up so that we could have great views from that spot as well. Okay. This is just one graphic that begins to show the resiliency strategies that we've employed and the sustainability with bioswales running down the streets and running parallel to the streets and parallel to the park, picking up all of that urban water and cleansing it before it was released into the city, or into the river rather. And then a whole series of marshes that we created, tidal marshes that we created that would serve as buffers and holding basins for flooding water so that they could catch and release that water. And of course, with that came a fantastic environmental benefit for the tidal marsh and all the habitat that one associates with tidal marsh. So it's one of those projects that just keeps giving on any day and any week, depending on the weather and the storms and the way in which the community finds itself down in the spaces, using it in all different scales. And this is just a peek. You'll see on the upper left, that's the Gantry Plaza State Park. And then down here where you see the ferry, this is the active area of the Hunters Point South Park piece. And it's very active. It's a transportation hub with the ferry, and the subway is just up the street a couple blocks. But it's a large, open, very open, multi-purpose space that can be used for any number of uses. The high school's across the street, so that's their exercise ground. But other times, parents are just out there with their kids, showing them how to kick a soccer ball or a football, since we're now in Europe. But it's a kind of space that just attracts any amount of activity on any given day. And this was the space that we wanted to really be the mixing bowl of all the activities in the park, where it would be most active. These are just some images to give you an idea of the kinds of things that kind of just pop up in this space, whether it's silent disco or high schoolers just running around, or a Bernie Sanders political rally. All of that actually manages to take place in this wonderful green space for the community. Again, can this space be a civic space and also a community space? I think these images will begin to show you that that can be accomplished. These are entries into the space, and along at the bottom of the slide, this is a bioswale. It is part of cleaning that water. All the water from the upland streets is getting cleansed, and we sort of cross that almost as a bridgeway and almost as a vestibule into the park at each street ending. Just to give you an idea of very compact dog runs and play areas. There's the continuous bioswale along the bottom slide, and of course a wonderful cafe and a pavilion that provides shelter for people and at any time, but also for those waiting for the water taxis. This is what we call the rail garden. Again, a celebration of the history of rails at this part of the site that's been translated into native grasses, and the rails have remained. And of course, that extraordinary view from this pavilion with its Empire State as its centerpiece. And then as we go down the park a little bit further south, that big landfill we talked about, this is how we've leveraged it. We brought this massive overlook, cantilevered out over a tidal marsh below. That whole tidal marsh was carved out of that landfill that you see in the image. So it was quite an undertaking, but the result is extraordinary, almost a double level park, because not only do we have the tidal marsh, but we introduced a whole trail along the tidal marsh for anyone who wants to get really caught in that dialogue between nature and the marsh, the river, and the New York skyline. And this is how we were able to do that marsh. We had to create a revetment along the edge. You see it here. And that revetment protects the marsh from the wakes and the storms, the normal storms that are out in the river. And by protecting it, we are able to convert that entire revetment from an engineered revetment to a kind of a living shoreline revetment. And of course, then when you add a trail to it, it's an extraordinary experience that New York has never seen. So New Yorkers come from all over to walk this trail. Just another peek of the marsh itself, and there you see the overlook. And then we took the other landfill and we said, let's really make an island. Let's create an island experience for this community. And we carved behind it and actually created more salt marsh behind it and sculpted the island to the point where, as you see, there's this extraordinary opportunity to move around this grove of black gum trees that we've produced and bring cross a walkway bridge, and it curls you around out into this extraordinary space where there's a piece of public art, there's lighting under the seat wall, and you have this really personal space that you have found in this public park. These personal spaces, these very intimate spaces that we all need. This is one of the ways that we were able to give that to this community. And then the tall promontory, we used a very fractalized kind of walls holding it up with native plantings and added a lot of native grasses, in this case, the little blue stem in the mist with the New York skyline beyond. This is a park like almost an otherworldly park, nothing like any New York park on and around the city or in and around the city. It's truly unique, and that's why it is held up as a great case study for so many other parks. We're going to just give you a quick video tour because stills don't always tell the story. So if you will, this is just a couple minutes long. Of course, the videographer wanted to put in sound, but we could never agree on what music that might be. So I thought 2 minutes of silence is hard to find these days, and it might be appreciated. So here we are. This is an extraordinarily diverse community, an immigrant community that's upland of this park. And the park has done everything it can to reach out and let them feel like this is their park, to the extent where they have really started these volunteer groups that come out and plant bulbs and plant flowers and weed, and they get very, very much involved and bring their children out there, so the children are invested, so the next generation is going to love the park as much as they love it. It's an extraordinary sort of heartwarming experience to come out and watch the way these people are truly enjoying their park. It's a park for the people.
Okay, transitioning to Nelson Mandela Park. What were the ideas? How did we shape this park? How did we get to where we are today? First of all, this really was a collaboration between the City of Rotterdam, SWA Balsley, and Arab, and we hope you'll enjoy the ideas that we're going to share with you now. In the very beginning, whenever we think about a park, we think about, well, where is it? And what can inspire the design of the park? So we tried to roll the clock back. We tried to imagine the site in the context of what this area might have been like in 1885. And, in this image, you can see the location of the future park. You could also see the mass silo there in that kind of bright pink square. But you could also see the villages and the agriculture and the way the trees kind of start to create different places along the water. So this was kind of the starting point for us in terms of inspiration and how we might start to understand the DNA of the site. And of course, today we know that the site is really embedded in a very vibrant and active urban fabric of Rotterdam. There's water, there's buildings, there's roadways, there's metro, there are people, there's density. We also know that the park site is in a very complex area, a kind of working waterfront surrounded by housing, different neighborhoods, different ethnicities, multicultural fabric. And so trying to embrace all the complexities of the context to inform the design and the shape of the park was very critical and important for us. We're also very inspired by just the working nature of this waterfront and how it continues to be that even today. And so how to embrace kind of the circulation of boats in the water and allowing people to really feel connected to that kind of activity. We're very honored that this park is one of the big 7 in Rotterdam. You can see it there. Park Maashaven is the name that was given to it in the beginning. It's now being referred to as Nelson Mandela Park. You can see how it's surrounded by all these different neighborhoods, and very importantly, you can see the metro kind of moving through the city and having a direct connection to the park. And so what were the city goals? These were very important to everyone, including us, to make sure that the park really connected to each of these goals: compact city, productive city, circular city, healthy city, and inclusive city. And what we'll do right now is kind of walk you through each of these goals to highlight how we connect to that. Compact city, very important. We're talking about density. We're talking about how people want to move around. We're talking about the transition between going from point A to point B, and how this kind of 7 acres of open space really becomes important to allow people to get out of their homes and to connect with nature and be with other neighbors and other people. Healthy city. It's important that healthy means a healthy ecology. It means kind of healthy air through planting of trees. It means a healthy ecology within the water. And so the park will really start to address all of those issues. Inclusive city is a very important goal, which is all about trying to make sure everyone feels like it's their park, no matter what your background or age. It's multi-generational. It's also very inclusive in terms of everyone feeling like there is something in the park for them. Circular city. And so circular for us and for the city, meaning that it's all about recycling, being able to regenerate energy, to rethink how we repurpose older buildings into something that is relevant in today's contemporary society. It's about energy efficiency and looking at how we can maximize the resources of the city to move everything forward. And then, of course, productive city. Everyone feeling like they could contribute to the productivity of the city through their daily lives, whether they're working from home or they're co-working or they're part of the fabric of the city through shipping, through the taxi. And then, of course, the kind of cultural overlay providing the foundation of what a productive city could be. Site analysis to us really was trying to understand what parts of the analysis could inform the design. And so transit was obviously a very important element, but also in the upper right diagram, the mass silo and its position within the park and how it could start to be a catalyst for program, for destination, for connection to the metro, and for other kinds of elements and experiences within the park. We had a series of outreach meetings. We presented to many of you on this call and many of you that continue to be associated with the park as it continues to develop. And the outreach and the dialogue is critical because the shaping of the park needs to be connected with the communities and with the various constituents who really are part of the park's design from the beginning to the end. We developed a program based on our outreach activities, and these 3 keywords really kind of came out of those meetings: ecology, art and culture, and community. And these keywords or programs are then kind of broken down into activities, activation strategies, daily program, weekend program, evening programs that in our estimation will be the ingredients that allows this park to really thrive in the short term and the long term.
This is a sketch at some point early in the design process that began to take those design goals and that program that Gerdo's just described and let it congeal into forms out on the site that are not only responding to the site itself, but developing a synergy with one another to maximize the kind of usefulness, the performance, and the experience that one can enjoy as they move out onto the park itself. So this is just an early sketch. It was complemented with a series of design, a series of sections. Next, please, Gerdo. This is just a series of sectional studies. As we're sketching early in plan, we are in the same simultaneous process. We're constantly studying, what does this mean three-dimensionally? How can we leverage three-dimension in this park and maximize the kind of opportunities for viewing, for interaction, for just getting a different perspective? So we're constantly studying these kinds of sections as we go through the process. And ultimately, it led to what is the concept plan? It's the concept plan for the master plan. And as you can see, it has these places that we've given names. And they are very important places because I might want to meet you at the Knoll today, or I might want to meet you tomorrow at the Cultural Square. And so it's really important, we think, that a place has its own individual spaces where people can identify with and communicate with. The park begins to take on a much closer relationship with people when it has that kind of naming opportunity. And that's what we've done here with the plan. Of course, the plan has an anatomy. All parks have anatomies, and this is our sort of one way that we can express it by laying it out, of course, in plan view, but also then putting it into an exploded axon almost as layers that are pulled up, and you can begin to see how all of these things come together into a single plan. And it also has, just beneath the surface, a whole series of diagrams that lead to the design, to give it a rationale, and to help to explain it, not only to ourselves as designers, as a process, but also help to explain it as we're in that public process, continuing that dialogue throughout the length of the project. It's very important that we can come back to these diagrams and bring people back to them to understand the logic behind some of the design decisions. And of course, what we haven't mentioned yet is, but it's maybe one of the real big challenges of the park, is we're basically taking a section of harbor that was a very vibrant working harbor, but is not so much so anymore. And we're looking at it and looking at a broader community that doesn't have really useful, viable park spaces for itself, and asking, how can we serve this community? And quite honestly, just like in real estate, when you locate a park, it's about location, location, location. And this location was actually the location of a lot of harbor workers, marine workers, sort of, if you will, working class people that were surrounding this harbor because they could just walk to work. It was a logical place for them to be living. And as the harbor activity begins to fall off, another group comes in and begins to mix in with that working class group. And that seems to be the neighborhood, the very diverse and exciting and interesting neighborhood of Maashaven. And they really needed a park that they could relate to. So the best way to do it, and this was the city's decision, is we could actually landfill a portion of this harbor. And that sounds like a great concept, but it does take some engineering. And thankfully, with the help of Arup and with the help of the city engineers working in collaboration, they have figured out a way to do this without compromising the adjoining structures like the bulkheads or even the metro. That kind of landfilling would actually create some structural issues with those things unless it's carefully engineered. And this section is showing you a little bit of what's going on just beneath the surface. And so this is it before, but we're breathing life into Maashaven. And here you have the park. And we're going to go on, take a little fly through now of our model. And as we fly through, occasionally we're going to stop and give you a nice rendered glimpse of some particular areas in the park that you might be more interested in. Here we have the metro in the foreground. And we're just hovering over the big green space, and then the great land formations that we've created. There are two of them in the park itself. And then we're going along the softer edge along the water with some terraces so that you can get down and put your feet in the water. And some play areas and play experiences where you can go right to the top of the hill and climb in that tower. And let's not forget the Mouse Silo building. It's such an important component culturally and in a heritage to this entire neighborhood, and it will be to this park because we're celebrating the Mouse Silo building and creating a big, huge skim fountain with fog. And this will be the place for any number of kinds of events and activities that are integrated in with the building, using the building maybe for projections, all kinds of possibilities. Now we're cruising along out in the Great Green Lawn, which, by the way, is also a spillover space from the Mouse Silo Culture Plaza. So we can take huge groups of people here for those special events, or we can come down and actually play some soccer, or cruise over the rustic play area to the northern end of the park, or climb up onto the picnic hill, where we can really get away and again into those spaces, those personal spaces. Just the family can get away and take in those extraordinary views, looking out over the harbor, but also looking out over the park. And this is just one peek of what that view might be over the harbor, over the marsh, and of course, over the activity of the Great Lawn. Now here we've created Tidal Marsh at the edge of the park. Helps to buffer those storms as they come in and protect the park and protect the community behind it. But you should be able to walk out and observe the marsh and get a much closer view and connect with that part of the environment that is kind of bridging between water and land. And a last view, aerial view of the park. Gerdo?
With that, we wanted to close and say thank you for participating in this talk with us. We're very honored to be a part of your community through the Nelson Mandela Park design. And we hope that all of you will stay connected with us and feel free to reach out for any questions that you have. We'd be happy to continue the dialogue of public realm, open space, activation, and placemaking. And congratulations to everyone who's been a part of this really wonderful process.